Hello, everybody. You've tuned in to EWB's October session of our Beyond Borders Impact Series. My name is Leanna San Pedro, and I'm with the team from EWB's Toronto National Office. Now, before we get started meeting our monsters, there are a few quick housekeeping items for everyone in attendance. First, today's session is scheduled for 1 hour. If you need to log off before that, do not worry. The session is being recorded and we'll share it with everyone after the webinar. Secondly, in the spirit of the Beyond Borders series, we want and welcome your participation in this conversation. So even though all of you are muted, please feel free to send us your comments and questions using this Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Several of my colleagues are on hand to answer your questions directly, and our panelists will also be answering as many of your questions as possible at the end of the webinar. Lastly, I do want to highlight our webinar code of conduct. The Beyond Borders series of live engagements has been designed to facilitate open and thoughtful conversation. Any form of harassment, abuse, or similar behaviors discourages our attendees from openly expressing themselves, and ultimately, this will devalue the conversation as a whole. So while we welcome those who might have opposing viewpoints, abusive and aggressive tactics and language will simply not be tolerated. Unfortunately, those who violate this code of conduct will be asked to excuse themselves from the session. Finally, I am now happy to introduce your hosts for today's session, Casey and Mohit.
Great, thank you so much, Leanna. I'm Casey Ferriter. I do campaign planning and community mobilization work for Engineers Without Borders around our policy and advocacy work. I've been with EWB for 5 years at this point. I started with Concordia as their advocacy representative, moved on to the distributed team, and then into national office over a year ago. Fun fact about me, I come from a big family, but I moved to Canada by myself when I was 18 and have built myself another family here. And I will pass it off to Mohit.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are. My name is Mohit Bagri. I'm currently based in British Columbia, but usually most of the time I'm in Toronto. Just for this month, though, we are out in the beautiful West Coast. I've been with EWB for about 8 months, I would say, as a full-time employee. And then prior to that, I was an intern back in 2019 during the summer period, so about 3-4 months there. So starting to get a little bit of time under my belt, which is great to have. I currently work as the Policy and Government Relations Coordinator here at EWB. And I work alongside the Policy and Advocacy team, help a little bit with partnerships in my government relations and outreach work. And a fun fact about myself, I'm a big astronomy geek, everything about like space, the universe, multiple realities, all those kind of fun little theories. Love them. I love it. I can get sucked into articles, podcasts, and everything about that. So if you ever want to talk multiple realities, I'm your guy.
Our very own Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, very much so.
So we're going to spend the next hour speaking to you all a bit about the annual policy and advocacy campaign, Meet My Monster. So we'll go over kind of the basics with you and then dive a little deeper into the process that went into building this, the motivation, the plan. So first, I will start by walking you all through the key elements of the campaign. So the idea of Meet My Monster, it begins with a moment of self-reflection. So for participants, we have an online quiz. It's accessible to everybody, Canada and abroad. And it's 10 questions that ask you about your experience with the pandemic, security, your community, your mental well-being, and then also, how you feel about the government's response to the pandemic in Canada and abroad. the Canadian government's response. And the point of the quiz is to give you the opportunity to kind of, own the challenges that you have faced. The reality of the pandemic is that everyone's been affected by it. Nobody has sailed through the past several months untouched. And we need to face that and accept that it's been hard. It's been hard for everybody. The next portion of the process, the user experience, is a segment that sets the context, the global context. So once you've faced your own monster, and when you finish the quiz, you will face a monster that is yours. Everybody should take it to go see their monster. Once you meet your monster, it's then placed in a global context. So the idea is that we are acknowledging and owning our own experiences, taking that time for self-reflection, but then we think it's very important that we don't lose perspective that while we do have our own challenges that need to be faced and overcome, in many parts of the world, these monsters are very constant, very scary, and are not new to the pandemic. The pandemic has merely agitated these deep-seated issues that are creating or enhancing challenges that for some people have always been around or are made so much worse than what we are experiencing in Canada if we're in secure communities here. And then lastly, if you feel so moved or motivated to participate, you've faced your monster with the quiz, you've been able to place it in a global perspective, and now it's time to take action. So we've created a letter campaign where we'll be asking the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, to add some support into the budget. I'll let Mohit go through those points, but it's about taking action and making sure that Canada is contributing to the global fight against COVID and helping create security, not just for Canadians as we face our monsters, but also communities all over the world that are facing very big, very scary monsters. So those are the main points of the campaign. That's what will be bringing us and the Canadian public and hopefully communities across borders into the discussion. And hopefully we'll see some changes around that. And so moving on from that, Mohit, do you want to talk a little bit about the objective to explain and expose the differences in monsters?
Yeah, definitely. It's as you said, Casey, it's definitely important for us to recognize that we're all facing some sort of monster, and everyone's monster might look a little bit different from each other based on our own realities and our own experiences. And it's important for us to keep remembering that there's others out there around the world that are facing all kinds of monsters, and not to say that our own monsters aren't scary as already. Other people have been facing these monsters for years and years, right? So when we're thinking of things like unemployment that we're seeing all around the country and the loss of jobs, we saw back in May an increase of unemployment up to 13.7%. That hasn't been seen since the mid 80s. So it's kind of scary when you haven't ever seen that in your life, and like, wow, there's a lot of people that are losing their jobs. But we also got to remember that in Canada, we have all these social safety nets, these fiscal safety nets that have been provided by a government that is strong and that's not only willing, but capable of helping its citizens, right? But then we see, nations within, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa, right? They've been seeing unemployment range anywhere between 0.5%, which is very low, to all the way up to 28.5%, like in South Africa. So we're seeing this huge disparity in just one continent, and these unemployment rates that we're seeing around the world, they don't even account for individuals that are part of the informal employment sector. And these are individuals that aren't employed by an organization or a company. They're more people that might be street vendors. They might be merchants. They might be subsistence farmers. They might be, anyone that doesn't really participate in the formal economy. And we see in sub-Saharan Africa, that accounts for almost 85% of the workforce, right? Is part of that informal sector. And that's the sector during COVID-19 that has been hit the hardest because of lockdowns, because of restrictions, the lack of tourism, right? So if you can't go to your usual street stall where you sell food on a day-to-day basis, how do you make that money, right? And a lot of these governments don't have that financial capability or that ability to fully backstop all the negative things that we're seeing that happen with COVID-19, and we got to realize that 1.5 billion people around the world are part of this informal employment sector, right? And all these different lockdowns, these measures that are meant to protect us, right? It's not a bad thing to have all these measures and protections, but what we're seeing is the inequalities that other countries that have been dealing with for decades, those similar inequalities we're kind of feeling now. But then those people that have been feeling those inequalities for years and years has just been heightened and just been graded by, this pandemic, which is horrible. For myself, I can only say that I sit on a privileged perch. I'm in a country that has free access to healthcare. I am employed. I have a job, right? My family has been relatively safe. So I feel very privileged to be where I am, and I recognize that privilege that I have living in a country like I do, right? Mm-hmm. So while we all have to face our own monster head on, we need to defeat a greater monster as a larger team, right? Because at the end of the day, no one is safe until everyone is safe, right? So that is the biggest message that I can kind of put today on that.
You've taken the quiz, yes?
Yes, I have taken the quiz, yes.
And what does your monster look like?
My monster is a green monster. It has a single horn. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look sad. He looks more like just kind of flat-faced, a little bit more, I like to call it the Zen. And he's holding a kind of like a scrunched up newspaper in one of his hands. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mine is also green. That alludes to the fact that I have access to healthcare, easy access to healthcare. My monster is a little angrier. I think that refers to my feelings on how the government has responded. It's got a whole crown of horns. I've got friends and family in the States, and the horns refer to how many people I know that have or have had COVID. So while there are similarities between Mohit's monster and my own, because many Canadians are going to be able to face the pandemic in a similar way, there are variations because within our own personal lives there are challenges that vary person to person. So your monsters will be your own, but based on how your community is served and is going through the pandemic, there will be some similarities to those that are around you. So we'll be able to see how different parts of the world are feeling about how the pandemic is affecting them and how people are responding to it.
Yeah.
So we have a little exercise for everybody. We're going to be asking for your participation. We're going to do a couple poll questions. This isn't a quiz. Nobody's being graded on this. This is just to help, take a pulse check on people's understanding of what we're dealing with. So this is anonymous. We won't know who's answering what, but I will let Mohit introduce the poll question to you.
All right. So question number one is going to be around the impact to our financial security. So due to the lockdowns and the hard hit sectors such as the retail and manufacturing sector, workers globally have experienced blank during the first month of COVID-19 health crisis. A 60% drop in income, B, a short-lived 5% increase in income due to demand, C, a 20% cut to their weekly working hours, or D, a 15% increase to the unemployment rate. So put in your answers now.
I'll give it another 25 seconds. Okay, 10 seconds remaining. And great. Okay, so it looks like most people chose A, Mohit.
Yeah, a 60% drop in income. If you chose that, you are correct. You know, along with the hours that are being cut, the increase in the unemployment rate, you know, the correct answer is the 60% drop in income. What this really translates into when we talk about financial security, especially for developing nations, you know, we're seeing an 80% decline in Africa and the Americas. We're seeing a 70% decline in Europe and Central Asia, and a 21.6% decline in Asia and the Pacific, right? And when we talk financial security, that's where you see a lot of the inequality starting to rise. You know, that's the first thing that people tend to notice when you start losing that disposable income, right? But a lot of places, like we said before, you know, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, people were already dealing with major financial security issues, right? They were trying to find ways that they can continue to grow their communities, grow for themselves, grow their business, right? And we see poverty has been an issue that we've been trying to deal with for years, right? And we have been successful over the past decade in reducing poverty. But what we're noticing again now is with COVID-19, the lockdowns, the restrictions and everything, poverty is back on the rise, right? And that's a scary thing, because what that means is all that the past couple of decades of work that we've done, we're kind of losing that work, and we're kind of having to start from ground zero, which, you know, we don't want to happen, because that means all these people that we've helped bring out of poverty are going right back into it, right? And there's new people that are going into poverty because these restrictions and the problems with the pandemic. So it's scary for us here, especially when we're seeing the loss of jobs. We're seeing sectors that may never ever fully recover again. You know, it's extremely scary, and we need to find a way to work together. We need to find solutions when we're trying to come out of the pandemic that not only helps us, but helps our neighbors and our friends abroad, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are ways we can collaborate? What are the ways that we can, you know, open up trade or create ways of building jobs, not only in Canada, but also jobs abroad, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important. So important.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note as well that you know, we're seeing this loss in progress, and while for you know, organizations in our sector, that's you know, effort that we would be remiss to see lost or kind of back on, but for people in the thick of it, it's not effort lost, it's progress, it's independence, it's steps towards security lost. It's way more tangible and thus way more real. And we're not the ones that are going to fix it, but we can certainly contribute to making sure that they're not losing the security that they fought so hard to gain.
Exactly.
So we have another question for you all.
All right. So this poll is going to be around health equity. So you guys are going to choose all that apply that you believe are true, and whatever is false, you're going to just kind of leave. So which of these stats are true? A, the pandemic has interrupted childhood immunization programs in more than 60 countries. B, healthcare disruptions due to COVID-19 could reverse decades of improvements, but results in hundreds of thousands of additional under 5 deaths. And C, less than half of the people in the world, around 4 billion, have access to essential health services. So choose all that are true.
Okay, we have about 20 seconds left. 10 seconds. Okay.
Oh, nice. Not bad at all. 13 out of 14 on almost all of them. So yeah, most of you are right. That all three of these selections are all true. So it's kind of scary to think that we're seeing immunization programs being halted and interrupted. We're losing decades of work within the healthcare and improvement and the safety of children, and that less than half the people in the world have access to essential health services that here we have for free, and that we can kind of just walk into the doctor's office or the hospital kind of whenever we need, right? So it's very scary to think, and what we also see as some additional statistics is that the interruption of these essential health services could lead to a 100% increase in malaria deaths in sub-Saharan Africa, and over 40 countries have fewer than 10 medical doctors per 10,000 people. So even if we gave all of these countries the therapeutics, a vaccine, ventilators, more hospital beds, without doctors, without people to actually, take up those stations, it doesn't matter how much equipment or how many of these life-saving things that you have. 10 people per 10,000 can only do so much of that work, right? So as Canada, we have a strong healthcare infrastructure, right? We have now, at the onset of the pandemic, we realized we need to be able to self-sufficiently supply ourselves with personal protective equipment, or PPE. And that resulted in manufacturers all around the nation coming together and redesigning the way they did things and building mask equipment, face shields, gowns, all these things. And now we have an abundance of supply of PPE for our healthcare sector. We have great science backing up our data and looking at vaccines. So what can we do? What can Canada do for others? We can help by providing additional equipment. We can help by lowering the cost of vaccines by participating in things like the COVAX facility that we've recently announced money towards. Things like having any additional doctors go help abroad to partner countries. Anything like this, these are the little things that help, right? Especially when you add human capital into the mix, right? That is so important. Like I said, we can give all these different kinds of supplies over, but without the right human capital and the right knowledge and the right people there, it won't always be life-saving, right? Without the people behind that equipment and that life-saving technology being there to help out with the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's no longer about our resources and their resources. We've got to pool the resources and make this about everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. So moving on from the polls, thanks for everybody that participated. Can we dive into a discussion about the interruption of health services, equity in healthcare, and a bit about that aspect of it?
Yeah.
Or do you feel like you had most of it covered in that last discussion point?
Around the healthcare and equity, yeah, I think it's just important for us to realize what we can do and how we can help out, right? That's the underlying thing I would emphasize around the health equity situation, that we have the resources, right? It's now time to see where can we help out as much as we can.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. Cool. So then we're going to take a little bit of time to go through the messaging of the campaign. So We discussed the mechanics of it. You do the quiz and you self-reflect. You situate your own experience with the pandemic. Then you get the context and you see how, you know, your monster, your challenges incarnate compared to others, not only within Canada and your community, but communities abroad. Some monsters out there are scarier and have been around a lot longer. And then, as I mentioned, we ask you to take action, and we'll be sending letters. So, you know, what's the purpose of all of this? What is the point of the letters? What are the letters asking for? The results that we hope to see from this campaign are budgetary changes coming from the Canadian government. You know, Mohit just spoke a lot about doing more, being more responsive, broader with our response to the pandemic, and making sure that we're offering as much support as we can abroad until everyone's secure. Nobody's secure. And our message to Minister Freeland addresses that. So what we are essentially saying, and what we hope you will all contribute your voices to, is a message that yes, we acknowledge that we are dealing with challenges here, dealing with challenges in Canada, but they're not so crippling or so shattering that we can't help abroad. We can contribute more. We're not going to solve COVID. We're not going to, you know, pull anybody out of a state of crisis or poverty, but we can certainly help start the process of healing and recovering and finding that security that's needed. So it's addressed to the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, because ultimately she's kind of the head decision maker on how the Canadian budget is set. And what we want to see, as I mentioned, is a bigger, better, broader budget for the response. Yes, we've made contributions. They're not insignificant, but we can do more. I think EWBers are always looking to kind of go that extra little bit, and we think that Canada can as well. So we hope that you'll be supporting that message. So that's Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Finance. We've supported that letter. And then, you know, how do we make sure that the right people are hearing this message? We want to make sure that this letter is coming in from all over Canada, outside of Canada. You know, if we're going to be contributing to a global response, we want a global voice participating in this call for action. Yes, it is Canadian decision makers that will ultimately be deciding on the budget. But, you know, if it's something that gets global response, or response coast to coast to coast, it's just going to demonstrate not only to Chrystia Freeland, but also our Minister of International Development, Karina Gould, and hopefully the Prime Minister's office. They're also CC'd on the letter, that this isn't an issue that has borders. This isn't an issue that has party lines. This is an everybody issue. This is an all hands on deck kind of issue. And so, you know, the broader we're able to show our support coming from, the broader the base our support comes from, the more likely it is that our representatives are going to say, you know, this isn't some niche interest. This is an everybody interest. And if Canadians want to see it, and people from outside of Canada want to see more contribution from us, then we better follow their lead and increase the support that we're sending out in the fight against COVID. So Mohit, do you want to talk about the 3 contributing factors that we specifically ask for in the letter?
Yeah, so we have 3 primary recommendations. So the first one is to commit to pay 5% of the global funding needed for vaccine research, production, and deployment, which sets aside around $2 billion in 2021 toward the access to COVID-19 tools, also known as the ACT Accelerator. So Canada has typically contributed 5% of global fundraising efforts to our response in many different global disasters across decades of recent history, right? So we've always generally given at least 5% towards that. So as an immediate response, 5% of the global needs right now would represent $2 billion. We've contributed $1.1 billion so far, right? The question is now, can we do that last $1 billion? Can we do one more billion? Are we ready to double down on that investment in partnerships for economic recovery? Especially while the whole world is reeling, will we rise up to our responsibility, and will we contribute courageously, even though currently our own budget is affected? So this is something important. The second recommendation is immediately adding 150 million to bilateral spending towards FIAP, or Feminist International Assistance Policy Actions Area 3, which is growth that works for everyone, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa. So we're seeing the pandemic has disproportionately affected underserved communities, like women who run small businesses in sub-Saharan Africa. And we, and unlike the supportive response we have seen across Canada, there is no employment responses or like EI or CERB in those regions like rural Uganda. We're seeing Ventures in Africa showing us this picture of hardship and deep economic crisis, as well as hunger, right? So without that continued support, many of these gender inclusive gains made in Africa over the past few decades are being threatened by just not COVID-19, but by economic collapse, pretty much. So it's imperative that Canada continue considering its bilateral aid focused on Africa, and an increase like that programmatic funding in FIAP Action Area 3. And recommendation 3, this is something that we've been kind of trying to champion for a while now, but we are kind of doubling down on that effort of getting the government to increase annually 7% our international assistance envelope over 5 years to bring our annual contributions to $12.8 billion. So this is ODA that we're kind of talking about now.
Which years are very familiar with.
Exactly. So, we're trying to get the government now to really realize how important it is to spend towards international development and goals that we've made, right? Especially in SDGs. This benchmark of just doubling, is just a benchmark. It's just the bare minimum that every nation should be doing. That 0.7% benchmark that was set in the UN. We have an obligation as an ally and a prosperous, generous country to put resources towards security and helping the world's poorest and the most vulnerable people. Especially in the context of COVID-19, the reopening of our own economy is interdependent on the reopening of other economies, right? Our future prosperity depends on safe, stable, and a prosperous global economy that works for all countries and all sectors, all sections of society. So our contributions to global development helps achieve just exactly that. It's to show that we are willing to do something about it. Because if we're the only one that's open and the rest of our partners are closed, economic prosperity just doesn't come from us opening up solely, right? We are a very globalized nation. We have people from all around the world here, and we do work all around the world, and we do business all around the world, right? That's just the nature of the 21st century. And without having an open global society and countries open and people that feel safe to move across borders, we'll never reach our own economic prosperity that we're hoping for, right? So we're very reliant on these partners. So those are our 3 main recommendations for Chrystia Freeland, the Prime Minister, and of course, our champion, Minister Karina Gould.
So if you participate in the campaign, you meet your monster, you gain the global context, you sign the letter with those 3 recommendations, you send it off. What's the best way to share it?
Well, once you do your quiz, you can share it all across your social network, Facebook, Twitter, text it to your parents, call your grandparents, tell them to do this quiz, call your friends. Spreading it across social media is one of the fastest ways to do it. but emailing people that you think would be interested in doing this quiz. I think it's important for anyone to do this quiz and kind of just see what their monster looks like. Even that in itself is interesting to see, and really self-reflect on how have I been impacted by this pandemic, right? What does my monster look like? And even if you compare with your family, right? Compare with your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your cousins, your friends, just comparing across those groups, you'll see that not everyone has the same feelings towards the pandemic. And there's a bit of a disparity between how each of us might feel and how we've been affected by the pandemic. So keep sharing across all of these social channels. Share it by calling, even if you got to pull someone in, actually don't pull someone in. We got to stay COVID friendly. We got to stay safe, stay in your houses.
I think I can actually share with you all what some of these monsters actually look like. So I don't know if that's visible, but these are the monsters you might meet depending on your experience. And if that's the case, you have the opportunity to then put it on your social, like Mohit was saying. Maybe recreate it, maybe find a way to rebuild your monster, write a poem about your monster, what it represents, what why it's green, why it's gray, what it feels like to be informed by the news or scared by the news. And just get creative in facing those monsters and pulling people in.
Casey, didn't you recently embody your monster recently?
I think I did. I recreated my monster. Now, as I mentioned, my monster is green, meaning that I've got access to healthcare that I can access quite easily. I've got a crown of horns. I know quite a few people, unfortunately, that at some point had COVID. Luckily, everybody is healed and safe now. And the expression on my face is telltale of how I feel the Canadian government has responded to COVID in Canada. While some people have been supported, there are communities for me here at home that have not been supported, and that makes me frustrated, hence the expression. So what I've been doing is wearing this mask in a bit of a sensationalist move. People say, hey, why are you wearing that monster mask? And I say, well, there's a whole campaign that'll explain it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Making sure that made an appearance, Mohit.
Yeah, no problem. I can't say my artistic ability is as good as yours. You've done a fabulous job of putting together your monster costume there. I assume that's going to be your Halloween costume this year?
I think it probably will be, yes. It took a bit of effort to create it, but we're hoping that you all see more monsters around. We're hoping that as people interact with this campaign, they're motivated to respond to it in their own ways. We can't be together necessarily, but we can all share this experience. So as you see people recreating their monsters or making masks to represent them, we hope that you all share your monsters and how they make you feel, what it's evoked in you. That being said, if you take the quiz, you do the self-reflection, and there are feelings that stirs up that are maybe less than pleasant, if it's triggering and leaves you feeling vulnerable, Engineers Without Borders does have resources available to help alleviate some of that anxiety. We don't want anybody to face their monsters and then end up looking at something really scary. We are here to provide you with that kind of information, at least a stepping stone in finding a little bit more peace of mind when confronting these tough questions and realities, because that's exactly what they are. So as you are interacting with these monsters, either your own or your friends or your families, do try and share. We want Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Finance, to log on to Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and see Canadians facing their monsters and owning them and beginning to take them down. And then we want her to hear the message that we are capable of facing our own monsters and want to help other communities face their monsters. So the more publicity, the more light we shine on these monsters, the better.
The less scary they become as well, right? When you shine a light, it's never as scary. The monster in the dark is always scary, but once you shine a light on it and you have a group of people there to support you, it's not as scary anymore, right? And then you can beat your monster and take it down.
So we have some questions that have come up as the conversation's gone on. Feel free to submit questions if you would like into the Q&A box. Unfortunately, the way that the webinar is set up, we're not able to invite people to ask their own questions. So please do put it in the Q&A box if you have any, and we will address them. We'll ask them for you and answer them when we can. But the few that we do have now are some pretty awesome questions. So the first one is, does EWB plan on keeping the monster generator after the pandemic so we can see how everyone's monster progresses and hopefully become less scary? So I can actually speak a little bit to that. What we hope to see is Canadians and other communities utilizing the tools that they have at hand, like their voices, like letter campaigns. So, your voice, your pen, your community rallying to ask for better policy and start to use these tools to take down our monsters. So this is what is going to help us overcome the pandemic and the systemic problems that it has magnified and agitated. So hopefully we're starting to defeat these monsters, and I think keeping the campaign, the monster generator running after that is a great way to do it. What we would really like to see are a lot of green, not so scary, hornless monsters coming out of the generator. So we know that not only Canadians have easy access to healthcare, but communities all over are starting to develop better healthcare, more stable healthcare systems. So yeah, I think that keeping the monster generator up for a while is great, and we're going to be hopefully seeing scarier monsters if our governments start giving us better tools to defeat them. So better policies and more security in our social systems. Okay, another question. How many letters is EWB hoping to collect and send to the Minister of Finance? So we don't have a set number exactly. Mohit, do you have like an ideal number, a reach?
Oof, that's a really good question. I don't have an answer yet, but I can make an answer. I can get back to individuals about that. I think what we really want, the goal is to have an array of voices being heard, right? An array of monsters being shown, right? It's, of course, the more people that we have participating, the more emphasis this project has and the bigger it becomes. But at the same time, we just want, Minister Freeland and members of the government to understand that this is how people really feel, right? This is the monsters that people are facing in Canada, as you guys try to lead us through this pandemic. But we also want to see action done, not only for ourselves, but for others, right? So I do not have an official number as of yet, but I can make one.
Yeah, I think ideally it's a lot. The more the merrier. But I think, yeah, Mohit, you made a great point that you know, if we have 2,000 letters, but they've all come from a single city, a single region, and it's not encompassing of the variety of experiences that people have had, it's not going to be terribly effective. So while hitting a high number would be amazing, you know, and really show a lot of Canadian support, global support, um, for better assistance, getting a variety of voices in there is equally as important. So, you know, the larger the sample size, the better, I suppose.
100%.
Let's say 2,000. Let's go big. Let's say 2,000.
Big, you know what? I like ambitious big goals. I'm okay with that.
Okay, we have another question. How did your team arrive at these specific recommendations in the letter to Minister Freeland?
Very good question. So it was kind of multi-pronged. We have been doing consultations with the broader sector. So other civil society organizations, we get together, we kind of discuss what kind of makes sense, right? And we also do our own research and analysis on the current government policies, what we've done traditionally, so doing kind of like a historical context setting. So yeah, so the doubling of ODA, like, you know, that 7% increase annually, that's been something that's been discussed by the sector quite a bit. You know, it's something that we've been trying to push for a while. And we believe, you know, setting some real numbers, some real percentages and real like ambitious goals is a way to kind of try to get the government to start taking it a little bit more seriously, right? And start really taking action towards it. The 5%, that's based on historical context, right? And what we've done prior as a country, what we've done before, no matter what our situation was, we've most of the time always given 5% towards global response and disaster efforts, right? The 150 million was something that was done internally, where we kind of saw, based on our own ventures, based on our own programs that we've done, and with consultation with people at CIDP, people that look at data, that's the kind of the general number that we saw as having this immediate giving, this immediate bilateral spending would help prop up this specific action area, right? And help get them through this pandemic. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of research that goes into coming up with these recommendations. But if you have more questions about these recommendations, you know, you're always welcome to send them in, and I'd be happy to answer them for you.
And I'm actually going to do kind of like a double tackle with this. If you participate in the quiz and then move on to the letter, once you've completed the letter, you'll actually receive an email that really goes into detail on the recommendation. So you'll have information on hand. So we have one attendee that asked, how do I do this campaign in Ghana? If you check out the chat box, so that's separate from the Q&A box, although it's possibly in there as well, but definitely in the chat box, we've included the links. There is a link to the campaign in English. There's a link to the campaign in French. And once you meet your monster, as I mentioned, there's going to be a link right there that takes you into the letter campaign if you would like to join us in that. The two steps are separate. You can do the quiz, you can do the letter, and you can do them both. We encourage everybody to do them both. So that would be great. Go check out the link. And then we have one more. Do you think we could reach 1 million people with this survey?
Oof. You know what? It's very ambitious. Like, I'm not one to ever say never. You know, I think that there's always a possibility for these things. I think it's going to take a very big team concerted effort if we want to reach 1 million, but let's do it. I'm for it. I'm totally for it. You know, if people are ambitious and people really want to get this survey out there, let's do it. Let's not hold back. You know, let's pedal to the metal, right?
Mhm. And I do want to mention there was a little minor hiccup with the tool, the survey being available on mobile. That's being fixed. So for the time being, like in this moment, we're doing things on desktops or laptops, but very, very soon it'll be available on mobile. I've always got my phone with me. I'm doing everything on mobile. So we understand that at the moment, not everybody can get to it, but I think once that little hurdle is overcome, if it's catchy, if people are comparing their monsters and they're saying, my monster is red, what color is your monster? And they pass it on and you tag your friends, you tag your family, you're inviting people to join the conversation. 100%. I think that we could really make this have a broad reach. We want it to have a broad reach.
100%.
The more voices that are heard, the better.
Yeah.
So 1 million, that's our new goal. That's our
I'm for it. I'm really here for it because as long as we can keep pushing it out, social media, keep showing your friends, your family, get them to show your friends and family, right? They like the more people that keep talking about it, the bigger it becomes, right? And the more exposure we gain, 1 million might not be a lot then.
So ultimately, the point of this campaign and what we hope you've taken away today is that everybody is facing a challenge. The pandemic has not been easy for anybody. That being said, once you own that, once you face that, maybe get creative with it, build a mask. Uh, Hopefully you can then gain a global perspective and say, like, yeah, I'm facing a really scary monster, but there are other really scary monsters out there. And I want to tackle my monster with better policy, with community, by confronting it and really looking at the systemic issues that have created these monsters. And I want to take them down together. I want to take down the global monster and the local monsters. We're only going to be able to do that together. So take the quiz, meet your monster, get that global context, and then ask for better tools to face these monsters head on here at home, but globally as well. I say here at home in Canada, but globally as well. We need your participation. A few people asking for better policy isn't going to do the trick. This is an all hands on deck problem. The pandemic is everywhere and we need everyone to face it. So that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Mohit, you want to say anything before we hand it back to Leanna?
No, just a big thank you for everyone that's watching and that's going to participate. Keep getting the word out. Keep telling people about the quiz. Show people your monster. Someone asked, where is my monster costume? I still need to build it. I'm terrible at art, and being out in BC, I need to find supplies. So maybe I'll actually go do that today and try to build a monster before Halloween.
Yeah, watch our social to see what other monsters are coming out. We'll be sharing them. Tag us in them so that we can share your monsters as you face them. We're really looking forward to having everybody participate in this. There's one more question. Mohit, you want to take on one more question?
Sure. Have you considered, as part of the survey, the impacts on mental health and the status of mental health in the context of COVID and other underlying issues, and make it more explicit?
So I can speak to that. Within the actual monster quiz, there is a question about, there are two questions. There's one about, your emotional response to COVID. And then there's another question regarding how news and reporting on the pandemic makes you feel, right? So there are two emotional responses that are being integrated into this monster that you'll see. As I mentioned, we do have resources lined up for those that are confronting some scary stuff, but we have a step later on that'll be introduced that hopefully will give people the opportunity to engage with that conversation a little bit more. So it's not integrated directly into the tool, but there is movement to create that space. It's an extremely important question, and I thank whoever asked it for bringing it up. There are, financial hardships. There are hardships with access, but mental health hardships are massively affecting people. So yes, that will not be forgotten or neglected or silenced.
I know we have 4 minutes left. I just want to actually get to this one last question because I think it's very interesting. Will we be able to see what monsters look like in different parts of Canada or the world? I think that's an interesting question. Will we be able to see monsters from around the world?
Yeah, so we will be reposting monsters on EWB social, and then on the quiz, once we've collected enough data and information, we're not collecting names or anything, all the information's anonymous, but as we collect monsters from around the world, we'll be creating kind of like the average monster that you would face in certain regions. So you will be able to see different monsters from around the world. I don't know how broad we'll be able to get it. It depends on what kind of information comes in. But yes, we do intend on doing that.
Amazing. Yeah. If you have friends, family abroad, send this quiz to them. Let's see what the monsters look like from around the world. That'd be great insight to see how other people are dealing with this pandemic and the monsters they face.
Mm-hmm. And the letter to the ministers, Minister Freeland and Minister will see it, but it's not addressed to her. They speak more or less from a Canadian perspective. You can edit them. You can change the wording of the letters. So if you're not Canadian, you're still welcome to send in a letter. There's no restrictions there. And if you feel like you would like to customize the message a bit, feel free. You are definitely able to go in and add your own twist. So anybody that was wondering about that, you've got the green light. Okay, I think we will hand it back to Leanna to close up the session. But I want to say thanks again to everybody that tuned in.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you again to both Casey and Mohit. On behalf of EWB, I want to thank everyone for participating in this important conversation. And if you have any other questions following this webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to info@ewb.ca. And for those of you celebrating this weekend, we hope everyone has a safe and happy Halloween.